Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. I'm seeing that Johnny D in the comments has already boxed his bricked his boxer or boxer bricked. Now, why might that be, Bruce? Have a good guess.
There are 1,000,001 reasons, Gary.
Oh, well, I was wanting you to come up with that. Oh, yes, they all do that for this reason or that reason. That's what I was hoping. That's what I was hoping
mine's
for.
Still
Cliff's
going,
not here,
but I don't use it.
Yeah, that's one that is very.
See, Gary's all fadey outy tonight, so we'll just carry on
something.
You're obviously paying too much for your internet, Gary.
Way too much. Way too much. I don't know why it always decides. Well, it's final week and it decides to play up now.
That bytes in South Africa only have 7 bits?
Yeah, must be something like that. The wind's beginning to blow. It's gone for. It's been 30 something today. It's going to cool down a bit tomorrow. Then on Thursday, it's going to be 6 degrees and snowing. So the weather's beginning to arrive, and I think that's what it is. Yeah. So I want to get Richard talking really, and then I'll be able to not do anything. But number 2 was the Call of Stewarts. In fact, it's the only one. There are no other Thunderbirds.
Thunderbird 5
and Cliff. As I see that I'm not going to mind about that, Cliff. I'm not going to mind. Yeah, Richard, you've been having some great successes really recently with lots of things. So before Bruce really starts laying into you, well, where should we start? You were involved in the trials. You've got sensor deployment across the UK or a large area of the UK now, perhaps another system. You can fill me in on that. And you're part of some drone delivery trials, I think. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Gary. Do you know what? I'll try and keep it quick just to really upset you because you're hoping that I'll talk lots and cover for your really terrible bandwidth.
That's it. That's it.
I guess recent news, we're doing some work with KSS, which is Kent, Surrey and Sussex Air Ambulance, as well as Everdrone. NATs are in the consortium as well. And our goal is to help Everdrone fly around in the Gatwick area, delivering life-saving medical equipment, including defibrillators, which is something that they do quite regularly in Sweden, but they aren't able to do here in the UK. So we're playing a part in that consortium, effectively using the Arrow technology, which is the same technology we use in the Skyway consortium, to look for non-EC aircraft. And the idea there is to help them, build up that safety case so that they can rely on our system to help them go beyond line of sight and save lives. So it's a great program to be involved with. It's something we've been looking to do for pretty much since the start of the company years ago. Saving a life with a drone is something that I know many of your watchers, listeners have done, individually. They've been able to go and support mountain rescue type operations or go out, help the police in some instances. What KSS and Everdrone are trying to do is make this part of everyday life-saving healthcare. This is the air ambulance charity that fly air ambulances daily and looking to use drones as a part of their future, which I think is just incredible. That's been keeping.
One question, Richard. I know that obviously Everdrone have been doing stuff in Sweden and they've been doing stuff here in Finland as well. We're doing a few trials from the Cesar project. I think it was last year or the year before. How have they been able to get permission? Because they will have a SORA base there. How are they able to do it over in the UK? How has that been challenging for them, or is that what you're helping with? What is it you're doing?
I think it's been challenging. It's been challenging for everyone trying to do something a little bit different in the UK, I think, or just a little non-standard. They're part of the CAA sandbox integration program.
Okay, right. Okay, yeah.
So that allows them to, I guess, work a little bit more closely with the CAA and look to establish a pathway that others can also follow. Right, that's part of the goal for the sandbox. So there's no magic wand to wave. Sadly, there's a lot of hard work ahead of the consortium still, but here at least the prize is worth it, right?
Yep. Yeah, of course. And this sandbox. So is this something which has only been for UK companies, or is this open for EU companies as well?
No, I think there are, the CAA recently announced a whole tranche of companies. I think Amazon was one of the companies. They've got another sandbox as well. So
Yeah.
I think there's a chunk of them, to be honest.
Mhm.
I think the consortium that we're supporting KSS and Everdrone with is the only one doing medical deliveries. I could be wrong there. I haven't really kept tabs on what everyone else is up to. But I think there's maybe 6 or 7 consortia, something like that.
Okay, because it has been quite. I know I'm not going to mention names or anything, but I know that it's been difficult for many companies outside of the UK to go in, not really to do trials, but to do actual business.
Right.
If they have that, and this is one thing which, if I want to be negative about the whole trial POC thing, but when there's an actual, let's say, business case for, a certain company and they want to go into the UK, it's not that easy. It really isn't that easy, and that is quite frustrating. I'm actually not in the UK. I'm based in Finland, and I've had experience of this myself. And trying to get into the UK is not easy at all. It's not easy. And you might have SORAs, you might have authorizations from, but you want to go in there, and the CA will just shut the door on you.
Yeah, I don't think it's much easier for folks that are based here, if I'm completely honest. It might appear that way, but there are different challenges. I think the problem is if anyone's trying to push the boat, it's just a little bit challenging right now in the UK. And I think the CAA is very well intentioned and it's got some good ideas and some good plans. There's lots of holes and lots of work that still needs doing, which I think is part of the reason that the sandbox program is still going today, if I'm honest. So yeah, it's a shame that that's the experience looking in. I think it's certainly at a time in the UK when we're trying to attract business and inward investment, it's a shame that it's not easier to get airborne here. But the work that we're doing more broadly outside of the sandbox is hopefully something that will make the path a lot smoother to anyone looking to go beyond line of sight and pilotless. Not just here in the UK, but we're doing an awful lot now through our subsidiary in the Netherlands with a view to getting all of our work EASA certified as well. So it's a challenging year ahead.
Yeah, but that's the Go drone, isn't it? That they have there, isn't it, in the Netherlands?
So that's for LVNL, just in the Netherlands. Go drone.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an exciting piece as well. There's lots, I get updates from the team that work with that every couple of weeks, and there's some exciting developments happening there over the next few months as well. So watch this space.
Because I thought there was an update just recently there. I thought I heard. I've not been using it probably because I haven't been flying there for a while, so it's been over a year since I've been flying there. But I did hear that there was a big update in the application and whatnot. It was supposed to be quite exciting. I heard, but I don't know. We'll soon find out.
I've put the map up because I've got to ask. When you say in the Gatwick area, what do you mean by in the Gatwick area?
Yeah, in the Gatwick area, in the CTR. So I believe there are 2 trial zones that KSS and Everdrone are looking at. I don't think it's all finalized yet, just to be really clear, because I think all the consortia only just recently got the go-ahead. So we've got a couple of months to work with them now while we figure out operationally where we can move our equipment to. For anyone that doesn't know, the kind of equipment that I'm talking about is the Arrow towers that we use to do the sensing in location. So we got to be sensitive to local folks around there. Got to be sensitive to, I think there's a wildlife conservation area just south somewhere. So we're now moving in to do all of the surveys to work out art of the possible. But we had some unexpectedly good news on our Arrow technology very recently. We were doing some flight tests, Gary, which you alluded to earlier, and as part of those, we're looking to we're detecting things a lot further out than we were expecting, which means that actually we would need less infrastructure to support the same level of safety over a much wider area. Early days on that front yet, but that potentially means instead of looking out to sort of 10K, we could be looking much further. So that would certainly help with something like the Gatwick trials.
So really, because you're operating within the CTR, you're operating within a very busy danger area in some ways. So it's not going to be full. It's not going to be full of lots of general aviation and other pop-up traffic. It's going to be very there's going to be transiting helicopters doing that, going north or south, and then there's going to be lots of traffic going that way and that way and that way and that way. But is that what does it? What much? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. What does that really prove in that sort of an area?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say the risk profile is certainly different operating inside, the wider CTR than outside of it, right? A lot of the arrow work that we do is in uncontrolled airspace, which I've heard folks refer to it as the the Wild West. It's obviously not. There are rules to it, but from a I guess a controlled movement perspective, anything can happen anywhere at any time. I think
because
one of the things
this area here, that gap there that runs up through there is where all the general aviation goes. So if you
but to skirt the CTR,
absolutely.
Yeah, but but I think the main issue there is going to be, like so air ambulance and obviously police and maybe it's maybe military or whatever. But of course, everything else is going to be, let's say, much higher. It's going to be much higher. But it's just and when you get into uncontrolled airspace, I don't know how it is in the UK, but probably the same is that they won't really inform where they're going, and they might not even be seen on flight radar, but you might see them in Altitude Angel. I don't know. We certainly see it on our app here in Finland. We can see the air ambulance, but it doesn't show up in flight radar.
You'll find in the UK it's a bit of a mixed bag. The air ambulance doesn't always transpond. There was some good examples, I think, a couple of years ago, maybe a little bit longer now, where there used to be a certain member of the royal family that flew around in East Midlands or something. Someone keep me correct, but he flew an air ambulance effectively, and that would famously not carry a transponder for reasons that are hopefully obvious, right? Paparazzi would follow him around everywhere. It's a bit of a security threat, and he's just trying to do a job, right? So that's one aspect. There are things that are in the airspace that don't transpond, whether that's Mode S or that's ADS-B. There are things that are transponding that just aren't detected, or if you're using an aggregated data feed on something like flight radar, quite often those positions get corrected several seconds after you've received them, or maybe they're so latent they're not actually helpful from a safety perspective. Useful analytically potentially. So that's actually probably a good segue, Gary, into the other bone you threw at the start there, which was what else are you guys doing? Because one of the things we've been very, very busy expanding on over the last couple of months, if not slightly longer actually, is our low altitude EC network that we're rolling out right across the UK and Northern Ireland. And that should be completed in just a matter of months now. We've got about 20 odd receiver stations online, and there are many, many more to come. But what's different there between the sort of aggregator or more sort of community-based installations is every single one of these installations is at least 30 meters in the air. So the antennas have a very sort of privileged, unhindered view of the landscape around them. We have extremely sensitive receiver hardware. So in a nutshell, that helps to pick up very weak signals from a lot of noise. And then we've gone to town on the hardware. So it's all certified aviation grade receiver hardware with very, very sensitive timing chips. And why all of that's important is because if you connect it to our to the network that we've built over the last decade, it means that we can do that processing of that EC data incredibly quickly whilst fusing it with all of our other surveillance data. And that's a sort of vital input for us into our Arrow technology, which will hopefully mean that, actually customers, users need to carry no extra equipment. They can just kind of connect to the platform via our API and start flying, and we'll give them all that surveillance information so that they can avoid traffic however they want to do it according to their ORA. So yeah.
So what sort of price would that? What sort of price would that cost? What would that cost me if I were to do that?
To build a network?
No, to cost me the operator. I don't care what it costs you. What's it going to cost me?
Well, what I will say is that we have a model for consuming the surveillance information, which is based on how much you consume and for how long you consume it. So, unlike something like flight radar, where you can pay for something called the fire hose, and that's I think it's tens of thousands of dollars a month, something like that. That gives you everything. Most of our customers don't care about where they're not flying; they care about the immediate vicinity. So it's factors cheaper for the durations that they need to use it. And then what we're trying to figure out as well is, okay, well, what if we're able to process a lot of that information and give them hints? Hey, what if we spot a conflict coming up in 2 minutes and we can alter your flight plan for you? And our audience testing with the big commercial guys that are looking at this kind of stuff is that kind of value that, because that allows them to focus on whatever it is their mission is. They can put their money into building a better aircraft, or better payload, or fly for longer, whatever it is they need. And we can kind of do the airspace navigation piece for them and do that safely. So just to be really clear, by the way, sorry, I can see there's questions coming in. Nobody in the country, nobody at all, residential, commercial, hobbyist, whatever, is forced to use Arrow or forced to use Skyway, wherever it is. The whole purpose of Arrow is that it's invisible to anyone that isn't using it. That includes general aviation, commercial aviation, civil, military aviation. So for UAV Future saying, can I just fly for free? Yeah, you can. You can just crack on and do whatever it is you're allowed to do in law today. And any of Arrow's users, any of Arrow's Skyway customers, etc., they will just get out of your way.
But it comes to, but this is where it's valuable for those that are needing. So if those that are doing BBLOS operations, for example, and you need to have the mitigation, and you need to know, you need to be aware. Even if you're in uncontrolled airspace, which of course is fine, which of course is better than being in the CTR. But if you're in uncontrolled airspace, you're always having the risk of, the emergency services, and that's, they will never tell you where they're going, even if you see them coming in your direction, or even if you see them taking off, you never know where they're going. So it is valuable to know what is there and where they're going, and obviously having the options, because that's because it is without that data, without that information on demand, you're actually losing business.
Yeah.
I'm just keeping this before.
Go on, Gary.
No, I'm going to keep this area up here, because if I had a network of sensors and I wanted to hold the feet to the fire of general aviation and other people and other AT&S services, I would set my towers up in this area here and see just how many infringements there are. And I think I would find loads just there, because we are held to such a high standard as an industry that this is an opportunity to gather data to start holding crewed aviation to a bit of a standard as well. And I'm surprised, if I was going to do that trial, I would have done it in here. Millions of people live there, and it's massively busy with GA doing whatever it wants.
I think it's one step at a time for the CAA, right? There's a reason I would say it's in a CTR, and that's because it's got that comfort blanket.
Yeah.
Actually the majority of traffic there, if not almost all of it on a daily basis, is entitled to be there, is controlled, is visible. But obviously that gets challenging the lower that aircraft is to the ground. And equally, as you say, incursions are not uncommon, or rather infringements are not uncommon, particularly amongst general aviation. Cutting corners, we do see that kind of thing. We don't report on it, but one of the things we have agreed to do as part of our sort of give back, if you like, is any university, any research organization in the UK that's accredited could apply to us for access to all of our surveillance data. So if someone wanted to do that kind of analytical work, they would be able to do that themselves. What is, more, I guess, really, really interesting for us as well is we've equipped all of our receiver stations with remote ID receivers as well. Although there's no mandate to use that in the UK, I think that's something which looks like it's probably going to come at some point. So we've tuned our antennas and provided actually a dedicated receiver for that. Although I have to admit, I'm still a little skeptical about the sort of receiver range that we're going to be able to get on those, given the transmission limit, power limits on and frequencies in use for remote ID. And equally, we've also equipped the sort of
Just to stop you at that
upcoming.
point, Richard, given remote ID isn't Sept, how can you say it's remote ID? That'd be European, which doesn't mean it would detect the UK, because the UK maintains that it hasn't decided on any system.
I agree with you, but every time I hear people talking about it, everyone's quoting something along the lines of that document that's come out from ASTM, and it's all quite well prescribed in ASTM. I would be very surprised if there wasn't something in that sort of ISM wave band. It seems like the lowest hanging fruit. I don't I think my views on remote ID are probably quite clear. And for those that don't know them, I'll summarize them very quickly. I don't know what problem it's solving, but it's not the one that we particularly care about. I also don't think it's a particularly useful part of the spec to have the operator's location broadcast. Again, if you know, I've mooted this question before openly because I haven't seen an answer on it yet. If we're piloting, you know, hundreds of our customers' drones around the country, up and down on the Skyway, and it becomes a requirement to broadcast remote ID, what are we supposed to broadcast for the pilot's location? There in theory won't be one, right? Or they'll all be in a control center sat somewhere very, very distant from the pilot. So I think there's a lot of privacy concerns with remote ID that just haven't been addressed. And I'm a huge proponent for privacy. I think a lot of people confuse that with being against security. Absolutely not. And that's the other reason I don't particularly like the proposals at the moment, because the protocol lacks all forms of security. So yeah, I'm not hugely excited about it, but there are going to be trials. I'm almost certain of that. And having our, you know, if you're going on a big hardware rollout, you want to future-proof as much as possible. So rather than just put, you know, very, very cheap sort of software-defined radios in, we've got very specific receiver hardware that can be tuned to specific frequencies with filters, etc., that are already pre-installed to allow us to kind of turn this on and test. And you know, we're also going so far as the things, you know, pick up things like FLARM. I mentioned the Mode S, so you can do the MLAT. We're also we've rolled out the 978 megahertz ADSB as well, because I think that there's a push for that coming, or likely coming, in the next couple of years in the UK. What's required? That's a really good question. What's required in terms of what? So Outage Angel is just a regular, plain old limited company based in the UK, right? We're quite boring in that regard. You can go to company's house, you can look at our records, you can see all of our, you know, articles of association. We're just standard company. If anybody, let's just say the police want to come to us and ask for information, we have a process, policy internally that we follow that makes sure that we always answer the same way. But the basic tenet of that policy, it's been a little while since I've looked at it now, is has to be accompanied with a court order, and the court order has to be specific, and it has to give, you know, it can't be overreaching. So, for instance, you know, we've turned down requests in the past that have said, we've had a report of a drone in the area of X. Could you give us any of your flight reports within an, you know, let's say 10-mile radius? To which the answer is no. You'd really struggle to define that as specific, right? You tell us what you're looking for and precisely where you're looking for it, and you narrow down the time window, and we might be able to serve that request. But it's not us being obstructive, it's us, you know, operating within the law. The law allows us and allows anybody to kind of reject a request for legitimate and lawful reasons, and one of those reasons is it's too broad.
I guess well, I've probably got two questions to put to you, but there's one that I'll continue on with that to begin with, because although that's fine now, if you were nationwide UTM effectively detected everything, that would change in time. Pressure would come to bear. As I worked in telecoms, I know, for example, O2 as a system implemented, you know, put there the behest of the government where you can queries can be put in to find details on a particular mobile phone. It won't just say your details, it will get you text messages, it will get you entire relationships to everybody else. So whoever else you text a message, and then it will serve the same queries on them and so on and so forth. So you can do, you can do a very, really focusing on people and their relationships and get all that data. So in time, once a company holds it, pressure comes on. That then eventually becomes far easier for authorities to get, because I mean that started off when it was originally a fax would come in and all these processes to go through for this data to be got, and then by the end of it, it's essentially it'll probably be an API that queries it all straight out these days. So I just wanted to put that there, that I do think for people that do have a concern on it, if once the UK has a UTM, be it yours or anybody else's that covers the whole country, that pressure will come to bear, given what we've seen with other technologies. That aside, I'll let you address that in a second, obviously as well, but I do have another question, because earlier on when Gary said he doesn't care about what it costs you, well, I do. I've got a question along those kind of lines of, obviously with this, you must be thinking, and it must be a plan, or it must be at least in your head, that eventually, hopefully, if all goes to plan, this will be a national capability where, because if we're to have drone deliveries, you would have to have national coverage so that someone can get stuff from A to B, and hopefully do that without having to interface with loads of different companies. That eventually you'd have either one UTM or you might have a few, but either way, that whichever one you went to, you'd have, like with the mobile network, you'd expect to have national coverage. You wouldn't want to have one for just Yorkshire and something for Lancashire and whatever else. So I'm assuming you have got a plan for UK wide or thought about it. And if so, have you actually already got a figure of what it would cost? You don't have to say the figure, but have you got a figure?
I assume you mean for the kind of BVLOS piece rather than the EC surveillance, because we were talking about a few things. Do you?
Oh yeah, no. So the second part of my question on the cost is about the BVLOS. So for covering the UK, so that you could deliver a McDonald's burger or whatever it is, and that's anywhere. So even if you're remotely in Scotland, or if you're in someone in an urban area, that have you cost, because essentially your network, you could deploy it just with like we do with cell phones. It could be a cellular network. It's tower after tower.
Yeah, we use that analogy quite a bit. Yeah, that works for us because, going to the business model, right? Early cell phone companies didn't just, I think back in the day, what was it? It would be something like 1-to-1 or something like that. They started, they didn't just plaster the UK. If you were an earlier
areas like started with London and whatever else, and
they started in the areas they had customer demand, right? Yeah. So for us, it will be the same. It will probably be a while before we have Skyway running every day in the Hebrides, but hopefully it'll be much sooner in London, because frankly, that's where most of our customers tell us that they want to go fly, and it's not surprising. I guess that they want to go fly where all the businesses are and where all of their customers are. And our job is a little bit like that mobile phone provider, that network provider, right? To give them coverage and to give them the ability to do that. So, we've spent, years now trying to perfect that model so that A, we can keep the infrastructure costs low, and then B, we can keep the maintenance costs low whilst, still getting the kind of certification levels out of the infrastructure that we need from an aviation point of view. And we're kind of relatively happy with those things at this point. And then it's trying to work out, okay, well, does Altitude Angel want to build towers for the rest of its life, or do we want to partner with other folks? Do we want to convert existing infrastructure, etc.? So we're very much, more in favor of that option than building all of our own networks, because again, we want to focus on the bit that we existed, initially to create, right? Which was this capability. If there was this big national surveillance platform that you could tap into that would give you all the aircraft positions, would guarantee that you saw everything that was in the sky, we'd have used that. So that's why we had to build that infrastructure. In terms of costings, I mean, I would say it's probably early doors for that discussion, right? We've had commercial discussions with a lot of companies that have, I would say, sort of fleet operations in mind, or already trying to move towards that. For the avoidance of doubt, that's very rarely people trying to deliver consumer goods to houses. that's usually commercial companies trying to fly hundreds of kilos of cargo, or at least 100 kilos of cargo between one airport and the next without a pilot in the loop, kind of like middle mile logistics. For them, there's much more money involved and much more value. And because initially the volume of flights on Skyway will be low, the cost will be higher. And it's like most things, as more people fly, we can bring the cost down. So, our goal is to get that down to pennies per flight mile effectively. But even that's a confusing topic. So we try and simplify it for now and just talk about flight hours. Because, there are all sorts of wonderful things you can do when you have software at your core of your billing platform. People have said, well, what about pay for priority? That comes up a lot. The only kind of priority that we're interested in is things like police and medical use or military potentially, as opposed to, well, Gary paid me a little bit more than Bruce, so he can go first. We're not really interested in that one. And then you've got the other aspects around kind of like use case priority is another interesting one. And then the other one is kind of like risk-based billing. So some people say, well, if you're really, really heavy and you're flying over people, you're higher risk. But then the other type of risk is, well, you're just moving really, really fast. And if you're moving really, really fast, our time to respond to hazards in the area is lower. So we're trying to keep things simple initially, recognizing that today no one can do this stuff right at scale. And so those first companies that move in will be taking more of the risk, and they'll probably be, they won't be looking at those coffees and pizza flights because the money won't be in it for them. So I would expect it to, I think actually in all the press releases we've done, etc., you'll hear us talk about high value, low volume, because we're not trying to support those, that, as I say, that sort of consumer good, fast moving consumer goods to your house, that type of thing.
Let's say, for example, one of the most, just viewing as we are, none of us can see into the wallets of people in the industry and that. But when we look at what's going on, Manor looks to be a very good example of someone that's out there testing the use case and doing so successfully. And obviously, their use case is doing those smaller value items, the burger to someone's door, and proving that can work. But obviously, if they were to go over to the UK, eventually you would, presumably, you're expecting that whatever UTM we have supports them as well, which could well be you.
Well, I mean, would we love everyone to be our customer? Yeah, of course we would. Which company wouldn't? But we didn't build Arrow, the underlying technology, to be dominant, in an area or to require exclusive control of the area. In fact, that's against the ethos that we built it for. Because I can't remember if I've told this story before, but certainly a long time ago, we were getting quite irked at the notion that, particularly in Europe, there were regions of airspace sort of popping up or being proposed that would require a sort of, a SIM card or would require a hook-on device from a particular company, right? And that, for us, just kind of locked down the market. It was just anti-airspace, really. Airspace usage has always been about, cooperation. So would we like Manor, etc., everyone else to consider us? Yeah, of course we would. But it's going to be an open market, I think, and I think it should be. Could the platform be a national platform? Yeah, 100%. It's been built for that kind of scale. For our uses, it would easily scale, probably far cheaper than what a government entity could build it for in terms of cost to the taxpayer.
Yeah, that was part of the thing. I mean, a lot of people won't know with the UK, but actually only 6% of it is actually built on. So really, if you were covering a lot of use cases like delivery, you would only have to cover 6% of the UK, and it would deal with that. If you want to do sort of the wider thought of, if you want to do security and you're looking at airspace and having that, we want to see whatever's going on above UK airspace. Say, for example, you thought, we might be going to war with Russia and they might have stuff over here and we'd like to have a better capability. Then you might want to think, we need to cover more of the UK. And again, your kind of system can suit that in that you can see general aviation as well. And essentially, you're putting out sensors. So you could put on fancier, more expensive sensors if someone wanted to fund
I think
that.
one of the, just while we're on that topic, I think one of the things that's more likely to prevent that right now is that, you know, without naming company names, most of these companies have a very, what I call an introspective view of the airspace. You know, they're either testing in a reserved area or they're testing in an area where no one else is allowed to play. And that's getting them the progress that they're getting. Try doing that over at the centre of London or Manchester or Birmingham, and it's going to be a very different case. So those companies typically don't want to share things like flight plans or telemetry because they view that as, you know, something which could be a sign of their activity, you know, their competitiveness. That's something that obviously as a UTM, our view of UTM is it's not our job to share competitive information with competitors. Our job is to make sure that competitors don't meet in the airspace, and that they can use that airspace without reservation. That's a really important one for us. So, you know, you won't see a UTM on our platform, or you won't see any visuals that we put out that talk about grid squares or, you know, being able to block out chunks of airspace. In many respects, it's a very analog sort of ethos, which is what we wanted for it. So I think the initial blockers won't be that, you know, Altitude Angel's in that location and I don't want to use Altitude Angel. It will simply be there's someone there and I don't want to share my flight plans with them. So those businesses literally won't take off in those areas, I think.
I've got another question for you, and then I'll let someone else jump in with questions because I don't want to hog the questioning. Now, obviously, at the moment, you as you say, you're a limited company, you're a private company. Well, I guess I'll pose a question. How do you make your money at the moment? How do you keep ticking over? Are you at the moment getting projects from the DFT?
Very big overdrafts. Yeah. Very big
charity.
Very big overdraft.
Yeah.
Like a lot of companies.
I was just going to say, if you're funded by the likes of the DFT and so on, and it's specific projects. But I guess the question is, going forward, have you thought about you see getting lots of private investors in to pay for the infrastructure, or do you foresee that maybe the DFT, CAA, whoever will think about action? Because my concern at the minute is there's so much talk with RAID and this and that and the other. It feels like we could have lots of competing technology all doing the same things. You'd have just masses of duplication, some private sector, some paid for by the taxpayer. And it all seems a little bit bonkers. It all seems like we should have, well, really just one technology in there. And even if you think about some of the stuff, if you've got a utility, you don't necessarily want to, while you want to have a free market, you might not necessarily want to have everyone building exactly the same infrastructure time and again. You know, in that we see with mobile networks, there's sometimes now they'll build a single cell site and multiple companies will share it. You know, they'll have an agreement. And I just wondered if anyone's thinking longer term of, should we really be duplicating this, or should we have one set of sensors, and then if we're going to divide it, do that as some structure where people have access to that?
I think there should be a grand national plan, and I think you'll find me somewhere in Parliament giving evidence. I think in 2018 or something like that, where I was asked, what does this industry need? And it's just a plan. Someone needs to have a national plan for what we want to achieve, and I don't see one still. I mean, in the UK, we've got the CAA's airspace modernisation strategy, which I think by the time I'm dead will just about have started. It might bring about an early death on anyone that's reading it, but it doesn't go anywhere near far enough to address what I would even regard as yesterday's challenges, let alone the ones that are coming.
I think 2-tier is the next big thing. 2-tier,
3-tier, 2-tier gear. You made me giggle there. You made me lose my track, Bruce. Unbelievable. But actually, coming back to Ian's point, I think one of the challenges everyone kind of says UTM, is there going to be one UTM or many? And for me, that's a little bit like saying the internet. Is there going to be one internet or many? Well, there is an internet, but there are lots of different providers. There are lots of different companies that host services on the internet. And there's lots of choice out there. But what's been common, sort of standardized and is much more common is how we transit, how we connect. And I think, a lot of the work that Europe originally did, albeit perhaps slightly flawed in some of the regulation, attempted to break UTM down and said, okay, well, if you want to go fly BVLOS, you need to think about, sharing flight plans before you fly. There needs to be some kind of common infrastructure service or common information service to kind of centrally host all this stuff. And that should be ideally some kind of regulated entity. Unfortunately, the way the regulations got written, the definition of common information service, I think, was taken a bit too literally. And you can read it as common, as in there could be many of them in a member state. So they kind of broke down. So I don't think it's sorted. And we've always taken the view that if we were waiting for this 10 years ago when we started the company, we still wouldn't have a company today, right? We still wouldn't have done anything. Which is why we've taken the view of saying, okay, well, we need a national registration system for our customers and our users. And today, just in the UK, we are the largest registry of private, commercial and recreational pilots in the country. We deal with, just in the UK, over 10 million queries a month from pilots. So that's uses of our map. So I think we are de facto a bit of a standard in the UK. But that doesn't mean that anyone is actually talking to us about doing this officially nationally, which is maybe a nice segue into Cliff's question, I think, Gary, if you want to flash it up again.
Oh, well done. Well done.
My memory.
Well done.
Yeah. I mean, so this is interesting, right? And I appreciate, and I really do genuinely appreciate the fact that you've clarified that, Cliff, and say, look, I don't think that Richard's some nefarious whatever. But I think, if I was in your shoes, I'd probably wonder the same thing, right? But, we've always tried in our company to live by the things that we say and live by the values that we talk about. So for 10 years, every single thing that we've done for recreational users has been free. That infrastructure is not free to run. If anyone wants to hazard a guess at how much it costs to run, just for UK recreational and commercial drone pilots, I might give you an indication of whether you're warm or you're cold, but I bet your bottom dollar you're almost certainly wrong.
Just jump in 1 second with that, though, Richard, and I do this with you every time. But the infrastructure is great in that, but the point from the recreational users is they're not asking for the infrastructure. They don't want the infrastructure. You're saying you've got to pay for it.
Hang on. I'm going to refute that. I'm going to stamp on that right there. You say they're not asking for it. But they're definitely using it, right? In fact, by far and away, the largest community using our platform daily in this country is recreational pilots.
Oh, yeah, but they're using it because they are being told to use it. They're being told to use it. Please,
not on the
No, actually, no one is told to use any apps. I think if you're doing flight plan, it's purely voluntary.
People have got in this chat, the run organisations tell their users to use apps like.
I think they advise them to use them, but it's purely voluntary.
Semantics over words.
Well, okay, well, take the heat out of that conversation for a minute. You try and figure out where you can fly or not fly as a recreational pilot for a person who's just opened a drone and got it out of a box. And I guarantee you.
No, that's easy. I know the answer to that. It's everywhere. The answer is everywhere.
Maybe. I would encourage you to check apps like Altitude Angel for the best advice. But look, we started this. Let's not forget why we did it, right? 10 years ago, it was literally impossible for the average Joe, who is not an aviator, who didn't have access to Eurocontrol, to get access to the base AIPs for the UK, so the Aeronautical Information Publication, much less make heads or tails of it. That data was produced at a scale which was like 1 to 25,000. So the thickness of that black line that you get describing a zone was basically your visual line of sight range. You could be prosecuted for doing the wrong thing, but you couldn't access the data. And then that is before we talked about things like NOTAMs and temporal data and the absolute mess of that system, which is still in that exact same mess today. So we give this data, let me get this out because it's very important. This data was made available by us for free, ancillary to our mission, right? Because we decided that if there was ever going to be a commercial drone market, we sure as hell had to support the recreational one for two very important reasons. One, it was getting vilified very, very frequently. Go back into the Wayback Machine, look at the news articles. Recreational pilots were the bane of everyone's existence
I said we
10
should
years
go
ago.
back into the Wayback Machine too far, though, because you have mentioned Gatwick in the past on the Wayback Machine.
I have, and you will find no record of me or anyone in my company ever suggesting that what we did as a company could have changed Gatwick or changed the outcome. In fact, it was a very different story for us. There were plenty of companies that we call ambulance chasers that went after that, but we didn't get involved, right? And you won't see a quote from us in 2018, in 2019 around Gatwick. I'm almost confident that, almost 99% sure. But anyway, back on the point, the second reason was because those recreational pilots would start to become commercial pilots, right? And that's something we've seen a lot. People start out, as something which is a bit of a hobby for them. They're not sure if it's going to be a hobby, but they start out, they get bit by it, they love it. Then they decide that they want to make a bit of a job out of it, and they become the next inspection company. And a lot of companies that I now know were once users of Altitude Angel in 2016, 2017.
Yeah, that is true, but it's also true that a lot of the companies out there, I'd say the majority, certainly, we'll say a lot are out there. They're not making a lot of money, and they could not run just doing drone work.
But that's down to business. If you don't know how to do business, you don't. You can't complain. You can't complain if someone's not making money. If you don't know how to make money, you won't make money.
You could say that the drone business generally, and you consider it going for the UK and what businesses will pay and what councils will pay, and so on and so forth. And I know lots of people in the industry. I know this is fact. Is that you don't get paid a great deal of money with it. So you've got to lots of some very well-known operators that are doing a very good job out there still cross-subsidize from other businesses, or they take the drone business and it's a little add-on to something else they're doing. And we've seen a lot of well-known people as well also dropping out of the industry of saying there just isn't enough there. And they had quite significant niche use cases as well. So and this is before we're saying to them, and pay for this and pay for that and pay for the other. So what I'm getting at here is when we're talking about infrastructure, you don't need infrastructure. You don't need towers to deal with all the...
we don't use the towers to provide recreational pilots with anything, just to be really clear.
Data, and DJI was paying even yourselves for that data. So you can have data provided by the likes of DJI. They've not really done it because they've been getting a battering, trade wars and blah, blah, which has been behind it all. But essentially, we could have, the DFT could be for us funding to put out the data, paying you to do it, or someone else
just to be clear, they do. Right?
And that appears in the DJI
CAA, and CAA have commanded NATS to make available all the UK FRZs. You can go to NATS EAD website right now, and you can go knock yourself out and download just the FRZs if that's what you want to do. That's what DFT and CAA have paid for. But that's it. That's all you've got, right? Coming back to what I think was your point around recreational users, because you again started talking about commercial users and people who don't have business models that allows them to support what they want to achieve. I can't speak to that. I don't know those business models. I can speak to mine and what we do and what we're trying to support. But from a recreational point of view, just to be really clear again, because it was Cliff's question that was hijacked, we continue to support recreational users for free in this country and in 80 odd countries around the world today, with access to the information that allows them to figure out where they can go fly. And in our most recent work, gives them permission or gives them the ability rather to request permission from facilities that require it, or that they are required to obtain permission from, so that they can get flying more easily. And it is in our interest, let's just be really clear, I'll get it on record again, it's in our interests to have everybody flying, right? We want more people flying. And again, coming back to that point, our interest is in commercial drone users, not one-man roof inspectors. I'm sorry, they're very welcome to use the platform and we love them, but we don't charge them anything today.
Except when the roof inspection is near an airport, and the airport has
that's not, to be fair, Ian, that's not Richard's requirement.
No,
that's not Richard's requirement.
But the airport aren't going to take it and do it for free because they're taking software and they're having to do their time, and they're going to. So the fact is,
I don't regulate
I don't
airports. I
think
don't
I've
set
seen
what
a
they
single
do.
airport yet implement the Altitude Angel without putting a charge on commercial users. So they're all feeling that they should do and can do. No one's feeling.
Sorry, actually, that's true. Just to be clear, there are airports on the platform that do it for free for recreational users, and that's the same software that they take.
That's fine for recreational, but then we should.
The thing you've got to bear in mind is that overall, the numbers of people flying drones is up. And I know that we've clashed on this in the past. You don't think that that's true from a commercial perspective, but I'm able to say from the data that we look at and from what our users are telling us, both commercial and recreational. And by the way, I mean I will probably make a definition and say that industrial users of drones, who are also a segment of our customers, people who fly fleets, etc., not including those because they're a different category, right? But recreational and commercial users, whether it's a one-man band or 10 or 20 person outfit, all use the platform, and those numbers are going up and up and up. And them having access to more airspace is their number one concern, because for them, the more places they can fly, the more money they can potentially make, the more customers they can serve on the ground. So that's why we're on that mission, is to get those folks connected.
Ian, when you're, if you're doing a job, so if someone asks you to fly somewhere and that's in a certain area where you would have to pay for permission, right? So whether it's from the CAA or whether it's from an airport or whether it's whoever, you just put that on top of your offer that you're giving to that.
No, you can't keep doing that though. That's
of course you can. Of course, because it's different every time. It's different every time. I can be charging. I can be doing a certain job, which I mean, if I look at my past few jobs that I've done here in Helsinki, right?
Stephen, all those jobs, you can charge in a different bracket than all your normal everyday drone users here in the UK. So you ain't being fair on this, because you're in a you do some niche stuff, and you.
No. I'm not doing niche stuff. I'm not doing niche stuff.
Some of your stuff is niche.
Sorry,
some of your stuff is niche, or it's more, or if it's sat in that category where you can ask more for it. You ain't doing a music video for somebody or grabbing some photographs for estate agents or that kind of thing. You have set yourself a different level that pays a different amount, but there's still those businesses that should still be able to operate. And I have to say this:
reality is they can, right? But everyone passes charges on when you acquire them. It's not a very good business.
But when you say pass this charge, eventually you get to the point where you can't pass it on anymore, and we are heading that way. Well, I don't even have to say. You can look yourself, Richard, on some of the commercial groups, and there are already people complaining about the airport charges from the Altitude Angel app.
So actually, just to be factual about it, far less people are complaining about that than the number of people that regularly complain to us that they couldn't get the permissions to fly in the first place. And the reality is, you can complain about it as much as you like. If you can't figure out who to talk to, or you can't figure out what the process is, and a company comes along and can make that simpler so that more people can do it, we can't do that for free. And reality is, airports aren't compelled to say yes to you. Landowners aren't compelled to say yes to you. So they're not going to pay hundreds of thousands of pounds for software that allows them to say yes, unless they can recover that cost too.
Anyway,
so I hear your point, but I've said all I'm going to say on it, right?
Yeah, well, I was going to say
this is how it's going to work, right? People will find a business model that works for them, Ian, or they go out of business.
People put fight on it, but actually not.
This is capitalism. Sorry,
and you know that actually, I don't bust your balls too much on this. Really, it's because, like I said, we've had discussions. I said the way I see it, you should have like with your Spotify, where you have a monthly subscription as an operator, and then you don't get hit with each individual airport.
Yeah, you suggested this, and that's something I've actually got the product team looking into, right? Because remember, whatever we suggest is we're one half of the equation, right? We've got a customer base who are the airports, they are the landowners that are figuring out how they're going to put the staff in place, or the policies changes, etc., or the signage that they need to put in. All that stuff costs money. They have to agree to those models. Now, the reality is, we're early in the rollout of this platform, but we've got hundreds of facilities connected already, but there are millions in the UK. So we don't have the market share to boss anybody around. We're feeling our way in very slowly and seeing, and this is the key part, what will the market tolerate? Because it's not in an airport's interests and it's not in the landowner's interest to charge so much that no one can fly. Otherwise, they've all wasted their time, and time is money, as we all know. So, we're here to support the business models of our customers. And I've seen it, by the way, I've seen a couple of comments coming in where people have said, well, what about this facility? What are they charging? If you haven't looked at the map, and this is just one of our apps you can do it in, but our partners have the same data, go pick one of the sites, click on it, and it will say UTM ready. Scroll down, and there's an item on there that says rates, and it tells you exactly what services that airport or that landowner is charging and what the rate is. It's not hidden. It's on the homepage.
Or to know with that, one of the gripes that has come out is commercial operators saying the airport's charging them a fee and doing a longer turnaround than for the hobbyist without a fee, which is a bit bizarre. So they'll say like 48 hours commercial, 24 or less if you're a hobbyist.
You'd have to give me a specific or something to look into. I can't, like, more broadly, that's not something I feel particularly comfortable about, but I'm sure that the airport or the facility has an operational reason. I don't know what it is. I don't know which airport or facility you're talking about. But as always, and I'll put that out there for anyone, if you're concerned, email us, hello@altitudeangel.com, and one of the team will actually reply to you once we've looked into it. So that's an interesting one. I can't see what you're on there. Yeah, so that's not a UTM ready site. So that's an example of an airport that doesn't have this kind of digital approval system in place. But what we'll do for the operator is we will take all of their details, all of the flight plan that they want, we'll turn it into a PDF, and we'll take the current contact information out of the AIP for that airport and email it to them for you, with you in on CC, with the airport directly connected. There's no fee for that. There's no fee for that. So, it would be nicer, obviously, if in this case the airport deployed it, but that's how it works. It's a convenience.
That's what's legacy then? Run us through this.
Legacy is an airport legacy would be a category for an airport which has no published digital means of communication. So maybe they've only got a fax or they've only got a telephone number. There are quite a few facilities in the UK which are still legacy.
So
but if that airport...
Just run that by. So there's no published way. So there's not a book somewhere where this airport's got a digital email or fax way of contacting them.
No. So just sorry, maybe I mangled it. I can't remember. But UTM ready would be digital connected. UTM basic is one where the airport's published something like an email address that we can use, or has some kind of facility that's a UTM sitting behind it that we can electronically send, but not check on the status of the report. So it's kind of like a fire and forget, except what we do is we copy your email address in so that you can carry on the conversation with the airport directly. So it's kind of like an introductory thing for you. And then legacy is an airport which in the AIP, the official publication for the UK, has no published website or no published email address. So, and just so we are really
trying to get at. That's extraordinary. Hang on, it's quarter to 2025. You can go onto our website,
by the way, and you can see a league table, if you like, of sorts, of facilities that are in each of the categories. Because we wanted to shine a light on this, right? It's 2024, and there are still facilities that you might have to fax. And I was part of the discussions internally where people said, well, should we use on the UTM basic, should we look to actually do kind of like email to fax to get these airports up and running? And that's the point where we took time and said, well, this is too expensive for us to do. If we got to start paying other companies to send faxes, it's crazy. But I think what's really important is there are airports.
Telex number. Everyone's got a telex number.
Is fax still like a legal document there? Is that why they use it?
I wouldn't want to speculate why they still use it, but I'll go back to something I learned a long time ago. Aviation isn't about the most equipped person. It's about the least equipped, right? So if there are people still using faxes somewhere, someone's going to support that. So look, our goal here was to bring this up to speed, because for the commercial operator that wants to get permission to fly from a UTM legacy aerodrome, is going to really struggle, right? They're going to, if they're lucky, they'll know the tower number, or they'll get in touch, or they'll know a friend of a friend, or they'll go through the AOPs and fish it out, and they might have a very patchy experience. But so far, and by the way, we've published most, if not all, of the case studies we've got ready so far. Every single airport that's published this, they said it saved them time and it's helping them deal with what their actual aspiration was, which was getting more people flying. It's a bit of a misnomer that the majority of these facilities want to shut people down. They just don't have the time. They don't have the resources. A bit like your local council doesn't have the time or the resources to pick up your bins generally. These guys are overburdened too, and this is a system to fix it. But I still feel like I never answered Cliff's original question like 3 months ago now. Well, Cliff, if you'll allow me to just try and wrap this up, and Ian, we're going to have to cauterize it just for a minute, because otherwise we'll never let anyone else talk. But look, we have done a lot and continue to do a lot to push for the hobby, to push for the commercial industry in the UK. And to this date, even now, everything we do is still available to the hobbyist for free. We have no plans to change that. Despite you saying, well, maybe you should offer a subscription fee, that's not coming. We're not doing that for recreational users, right? For commercial users, we're taking your idea on board and we're trying to think this through, but we're not in a position to be able to kind of comment more broadly on that, or to even have those discussions with our downstream customers yet, because again, it's got to be a business model that works for them. And, whilst I started off by saying, look, I can understand how you might look at a company like AA and think, wow, what are you going to do with all this data? And surely you're going to eradicate the hobby. But if we do that, then it's a bit like, for us, it would feel like you're cutting off the roots of something very important, right? We support universities and we support secondary schools, trying to push lower and support, infants and primary schools with access to cool drone stuff.
Unborn babies.
Babies as well, did you say? I don't know.
I've
got a young daughter. She's very dangerous around anything sharp. So rotating drone blades maybe is best to keep her away from. But look, joking aside, this is important to us.
I've had experience over the years with Altitude Angel, Frequentis, and many others, and I've never, and that's been from the professional side, but I've never seen any evidence where they want to cut out the hobby. I've never, and when I say this, but obviously because of my let's say my stance in the industry or whatever it is, or whatever. Actually, no one believes me when I say that they're not against the hobby, and everyone seems to think that when a UTM comes in, that's it. It's just going to be the end of everything. And I've never ever seen that, and I've always seen where they would actually accommodate to have someone from the hobby there. And I've always suggested, when we have these trials, when the trials going on, and this has been with all of the UTM operators, I always say, look, there is a hobbyist here, and I'm sitting here doing nothing. I want to put a drone up. So can you, I want you to accommodate. And they're like, yeah, okay, yeah. But there's never anything to say end of the hobby. I've never ever seen that before, and that's something. But I do have a question for you. What do you think about the, can I say, saturation of UTM in the world or out there, and how is it? What do you think? Or maybe I shouldn't use the word saturation, but there are quite a lot of UTM companies out there. What do you think of where you are and where they are, and is there room? Because obviously Wing, for example, Wing are in the UK. They have their own UTM. So how does that work with Altitude?
I think the biggest challenge for us is that we help to define what a UTM industry is, and then everyone was a UTM. I remember there was I think it was in 2017 we went to a trade show in the Docklands in London. No, sorry, I lie. It was in Madrid, of all places. It's a World ATM Congress, as it was known then. And it's just chock full of traditional ATM aviation companies, right? Very, very little to do with drones in 2017. And we rocked up with a tiny little booth talking about UTM. We had a very successful day there, lots and lots of news. And the next morning, I kid you not, it surprised me just how quick these big companies could print the words UTM and have them on their stands, right? And it became a buzzword. And I think to a lot of people, you're a UTM if you write software for drones, right? That's as broad as it gets. You're a UTM if you've got a fleet of drones, I've seen, and I kind of understand that more. Although we would categorize anyone who writes software principally for their operations, and principally whether it's one drone or 1,000 drones. If it's your drone, it's not a UTM. What you're doing is fleet management, right? Yeah. If you're operating, where you're operating some kind of bureau, or you're operating as an exchange, you're providing a service where you're trying to, codify safety. Maybe you're doing something at a national level. You're starting to, I would say, automate what happens on air traffic control, that kind of stuff. Then you're probably more of a UTM. And I think in the last 10 years, there's been probably 20 or maybe 25 folks on our competitor list. I think there are 3 still going. And of those, I think one is particularly gratuitous in its marketing. And I don't blame people who don't like UTM companies as a result. So I think, UTM shouldn't mean anything to anybody unless you need them. In the same way that if you don't own a mobile phone, you do not care who EE is or Vodafone, right? They're there. They're all around you, broadcasting all the time, but you can't stop them and they don't interfere with you. So
5G rots your brain.
I told you about the tower that we lost, didn't I, to the 5G guys? But
No.
look, the reality is, I do think
that
that's coming up. But there's a reason that our towers now have on the sign, "This is not a 5G mast."
I do remember you're saying that you did put that message on. You have,
yeah, it's a little bit worrying. But to answer your question, I think, I think we're a little bit tired of all the noise that's out there. We stopped trying to speak louder than it all, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and just try and speak clearly, right? Well, I'm probably not doing the best job at that tonight. Our job as a UTM is to think above the fleet and think, how do we get all of these fleets flying? How do we do that in a way that doesn't change what recreational users want to do? And let's not forget, it doesn't change what existing aviators can do today. You want to fly a drone commercially today. If you're Wing and you want to come to the UK and do a trial, you take out chunks of airspace to general aviation traffic, right? It's a temporary reserved area. Inefficient, painful, but a company, Wing don't want to do it, but that's what they're forced to do. So I think UTM is a means towards introducing autonomy into the aviation chain. That's what it's about.
I just wanted to go to Sparky's comment here, that if you don't use AA, it's free to take off and land wherever the landowner would be charging to take off and land. Now, would I be right in saying, actually, no, that would be trespass then? If you took off and land somewhere and had declared they wanted a fee, you'd actually be trespassing then. And that's not
trespassing. You've been asked to leave, is it? Or you've been?
I don't know. There'll be some exactly what I say. I don't know the legal definition, but you're definitely acting against things. So somebody has defined it. And Sparky was asking about the sites in Scotland, and the only one I could think of was Stirling Castle, which might be it. So maybe we can come back to Sparky's questions on that.
There was a problem, right? And I've always said that you should own your mistakes, right? And this particular mistake happened on Friday very late in the evening, and by Saturday morning, anyone who thinks, by the way, that commercial drone pilots don't use our platform need to think about the speed this news moved. But by Saturday morning, it was all over these kind of commercial forums. What we'd mistakenly done was kind of jump the gun, but in the wrong way. We have a draft system on our platform which allows landowners that we're working with, we call it onboarding, where we're ingesting all their information, all of the takeoff and landing areas that they control, that they're trying to enable. We inadvertently publish them as no drone zones, which is about as tragic of a mistake that we could have made. But 20 minutes after we discovered it, we reverted that change. But by then, people had seen it. But the reality is what's actually happening here is that Historic Environment Scotland, and I'm telling your users and your watchers ahead of the announcement next week, Historic Environment Scotland are planning to open 70 locations that are currently not available for drone flight on the 2nd of September. And then on the 16th of September, a further 157. So, this is a good thing. It's taking sites which today either you can get permission from Historic Environment Scotland, and they're actually pretty pro-drone anyway, but their own policy says, and I quote, "Although our team will endeavour to turn around an application as quickly as possible, all drone pilots should allow for up to 10 working days or longer for more complicated application requests." When they've got this service in place, their SLA is to respond to all requests within a maximum of 5 working days. So that means recreational, commercial, you can get permission from 157 sites on the 16th of September, 70 come in on the 2nd of September.
Is that going to
I can
cost
see-
money for the
So the
user?
bit of information I don't have is I don't know what they're charging. I don't even know if they've completed uploading those rates. But on the 2nd of September, anyone today that wants to go onto the service, click a button and get permission to fly in some of the most beautiful scenery, or based on some of the most beautiful scenery that I've personally seen, then you'll be able to do that on the platform, and we're delighted to support that, right?
Yeah, I can see auditors descending on these places and taking off just outside the boundary and flying over, and then the people inside going, "It's against our policy," and all
providing that
sorts of
there's
great video
no
on YouTube.
So I'm told reliably, although I don't have all the information to hand in front of me, so I'm sure someone else will be more sleuthy, that some, and it's a very small number of Historic Environment Scotland sites, they have some devolved power which allows them to restrict flight over specific monuments. I haven't verified that personally, but that's what I'm told. If they have a legal right to that, and we can verify that, that's what our map will show. But every other site will show a yellow zone that you will be able to request permission to take off and land from. And let's just be clear, what we're not charging you for is the ability to choose to take off and land. What that customer is doing is saying, if you want to come into my private property from which to base your operation, that is what they are charging for. So there is a distinction between those, which we call landowner zones, and airspace zones in our platform. And that, coming back to full circle, the mistake that we made, and it was, as I say, it was put out quite quickly, but unfortunately it was a mistake that we made. We took all of their draft zones and inadvertently published them as red no drone zones. That was on us. It was not Historic Environment Scotland. It was an error on our part. And I'm very sorry for the confusion that it caused everyone. But the moment that my team were notified, it didn't take long. We had about 7 tickets in 20 minutes on our platform, and this was late on a Friday night. I think it was getting on for like 11 p.m. We fixed it. So sorry, it was our fault. We fixed it. It shouldn't happen again.
You don't handle problems like this in the modern world. You cover it up and say it was a glitch, we got hacked. You don't admit to these things and then put them right.
Chinese.
No, you need to catch up.
No, people on Twitter did notice the fact that you'd fixed it. It went out actually before midnight that you'd fixed it. And we're grateful. In fact, Bruce, you put the comment up of saying it was good that the Altitude Angel had acknowledged it and sorted it out. But anyway, that says my Twitter feeds read a lot because I was the first to retweet it.
Well, I know you sit there waiting for us to step on a landmine, and we did, right? We stepped on it and went, oh no, what have we done? But there is a feature in our system which you guys will probably appreciate, is that there's a kind of advanced warning that we do. So sometimes a NOTAM is published. So let's say it's published on a Monday, but it's not active until Friday. We give our users advance notice. So it will go on our map as I think it's a blue zone, but when it comes into force, it will go red if it describes a restriction, for instance. I think it was that mechanism which picked up our draft features, geographies features for Historic Environment Scotland. And as I say, it should have happened. There was an update earlier that day. We introduced probably a bug. It's still checking, still investigating. But just to say, I just wanted to thank my team for that, because I was asleep, right? They put that fire out, and I got the update on Saturday morning when I was in Bath, enjoying my my anniversary. So they know that they dealt with that. And one particular chap on our team, I probably shouldn't name, he went above and beyond to make sure it was all put out in 20 minutes. So that's how much we do care about our users, right? Because again, no one's paying us for that. We just needed to get it right, and we got it wrong. So again, sorry.
I should say there is a lesson from that that's known across the software industry: is never ever deploy on a Friday.
Yeah, I don't.
Go wrong.
To be fair, I think it was lurking there for a little while, and
it was just triggered. Yeah.
Historic Environment Scotland has a historic amount of sites. So I think it's probably a combination of something we'd not checked properly in the software side on the draft system and a process that we've now got right. But we are, as I say, we jumped the gun a little bit because the good news comes from Historic Environment Scotland on the 2nd of September, where folks can go do that. And I know that there are some fantastic sites that they look after. There are some, in the list they've asked us not to name specific sites, but there are some fantastic sites that they're looking to bring on board.
So we can expect a pile load of castle pictures and videos over the next couple of months then. Huh?
Yeah, well, no doubt. I know we probably should let Richard draw breath, actually, because
I'm not coming back anymore, Gary.
Was of a spectacular a spectacular level. Because the one thing I wanted to make sure we introduced before, because we've been going an hour and 16 already, which is great. But before Ian has his rant, the airspace is free.
I was going to say though, Gary,
we're not going to
the fact that I give everybody a hard time.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, you're an equal opportunities hard time giver. That is true. That's very, very true. That our dear friends at ANZU have had a bit of a run-in with some senators. So you can read that, but they're calling them out for their DGI-ness. I wonder if we had any thoughts on that. And I have shoes in my adverts.
Obvious going to happen, which is.
Do you think Kieran had anything
I was
to do
always
with
puzzled why part of the ANZU thing wasn't also thinking about doing something along the Argicopter lines or something. Just because you will have a target on your back for you forever with this, so you are going to have to keep jumping about. That said, I'll still be surprised if the US does ban DJI, and if that is the ultimate thing, and if it does affect ANZU, I'd still be quite surprised, but who knows? Who knows? I mean, a lot of it will depend actually who gets voted in, because Trump really started this trade thing to the degree it's got to. So I think if Trump is elected, it will get worse. Where if Kamala Harris is elected, it may not. And obviously, I don't think anyone would want to predict that result. So I think anybody who's a target at the minute, it'll probably give you a few sleepless nights. But it's one of those things. I couldn't call the way this would go.
Sorry, what was that, Bruce?
It's just hire more hookers if you got sleepless nights. Simple solution.
Well, analog solutions are very often a lot better than digital solutions. Anyway, there are digital solutions available for that. But anyway, the Randall did send me a pretty positive note. I don't know quite sure how because I was hoping he could join us, but he's in calls, funnily enough, and he says his overall we consider all this a positive thing, as it gives us an opportunity to show lawmakers exactly what we're doing and how, and make this less about rumors, assumptions, and misconceptions. I'm overall thrilled to have a voice in this. So power to him. He's a very positive fellow, and he's pushing, isn't he? I mean,
he's very up, like you've noted, he's very up for the fight, and that's why I suspect if anyone would succeed in this line, he would, because he's at least. I mean, he wasn't naive to the fact that he was going to have this target on his back, but he seemed confident from the outset that it was something that he could stand up to and challenge. So I guess we will see.
No, it is amazing. And Cliff said, hasn't the US started change? I could have put that up on the screen, couldn't I? Changing bills to be more anti-Chinese. Yeah, they have. But what I think the big miss that's happening in the industry as a whole now is China has said on September the 1st they are going to start restricting yet more parts of drone exports actually coming out of China. And people are missing this. It was reported, as I've said it the last 3 weeks, I think now, it was reported as, oh, look, they're lifting restrictions. They're increasing them. So I'm very interested to see what happens after September the 1st.
If only we could get a popular drone news site to publish that.
If only we could do that. Yeah, that seems impossible to me. Seems completely impossible.
But Canada's doing a tax.
100% tax.
100% tax on EVs from China. So it looks like, looks like we could be in for a bit of to and froing with the US, Canada, and it'll be interesting to see if anyone else gets in on the act. But I don't think it does anyone any favors at all when you get into these trade war. Everyone kind of suffers.
Won't do the environment any good, will it?
No, absolutely not. But it also said, to me, it just says, oh, we can't make these things. We're no good at making them.
Yeah.
As a country.
Trade protection. That's all it is.
And Cliff's saying they're cutting their nose off to spite their face. I don't think so, Cliff. I think they're demonstrating kind of soft power, saying, well, we got you addicted to this stuff. Now you can't have it because their own markets are big enough.
China can't make enough to supply Russia and Ukraine anyway.
No, they can't. It can't.
So they don't need the West.
No, they don't. Exactly. I know of one autopilot manufacturer that's stuffing an awful lot of autopilots out that way a day, not a week, not a month, not a year, a day. And
I tell you what, when the war's over, there's going to be a fortune to be made by fossicking those fields, motors, ESCs, flight controllers, all sorts of stuff laying on the ground. Some of it bent and broken, but the rest of it, you just recycle it. It'd be brilliant.
Well, the peace dividend's going to be pretty interesting, isn't it? There's always one after a war. So once Ukraine has won, there's the technology and the expertise that'll come out of there. The West can't, or the US in particular, can't touch it. Can't touch it, and they're still claiming success. Hang on, I'm getting on Ian's high horse for that replicator thing. There's still. It's 1 year. It's August. Well, last August. There still isn't. Here's 10,000 things we made in the replicator program. They haven't made one. One. It's ridiculous. And Ukraine will have iterated. How goodness knows, our dear viewers would know better than me, or we'd all be able to,
didn't they? They
put
said
a
they're
guess
going
on
to make
it.
$1 million in a year. They were going to.
But then also, think flight mine locating drones are the next big thing, and they are. That's exactly what SPH is doing. They're getting that lined up. But I'm sure Ukraine will have not perhaps making. I wasn't thinking to the making 1 million drones. They would have iterated 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times on a design in that year to make it better. And anyway,
Shall I rip Richard a new one now? Because I've been very quiet.
Yeah, it's your turn now. Yeah.
Notes.
Right, I'm ready. Well, we gave him 5 minutes off there. So okay, on you go.
I like Richard. He's a nice guy. I got nothing to say. Actually, no, I tell a lie. He talked about aviation grade radios. Doesn't that mean a design that's 20-year-old and has too many cable ties and has got a conformal coating? Isn't that aviation grade these days? That's not necessarily state of the art, is it? How much aviation stuff? I can't hear him.
That's because I've got 2 mute buttons. I still can't operate either of them independently. It usually means something that's far bigger than it needs to be, with a lot more space and a lot more cooling. Yes, to incredible cable management, but it also means all the declarations of conformity, the receiver sensitivity testing, etc. So there's for a lot of this stuff, there's some good stuff in there. But I think to set to throw some numbers out, there's a difference between spending 500 quid on a reasonably good ADSB receiver with ARM, etc., and spending 13,000 pounds on a unit. And the units that we're deploying start in that kind of region, and then you've got to pay for your antennas and decent coax and the people to go out and do the surveys and cite them, etc. So that's what we're trying to do, is kind of distinguish by having that quality of receiver and that receiver sensitivity.
Yep. So it's just as long as you're not getting ripped off, that's fine.
I think those Bruce. I think
There's
those
a hefty-
ADSB
hefty
signals.
price.
I think they're a bit more bassy. You know, it's like an LP
Yeah.
versus
Well,
CD.
yes, it's the ADSB that's the people you're
Yes.
pleasing. No.
Yeah.
But just some news came in here. In New Zealand, CAA have to be fully self-funding now, but as of 2025, no more handouts from the government. And I'm thinking that's probably not going to be very good for the drone industry, because they got their AirShare UTM, you know, that thing that they're saying is going to take over the world. I suspect that'll become a mandatory thing to help keep CAA rolling along because the government's not funding it. They haven't announced any new fees and charges. They've announced changes to existing fees and charges. But you can guarantee they have to go from being government funded to being self-supporting. There's going to be a lot of new fees and charges introduced in the next year or so. And I think drones are going to carry a fair burden of that. So that's the traditional UTM people are thinking about. Because to give Richard his credit, Altitude Angel to me seems to be a vastly different tech to all the other UTMs that have been proposed. They all based on everyone that uses it pays a whole lot of money, and that's where the profits come from. But Richard's seems to be far more benign in terms of the hobby. We don't have to pay anything to take advantage of the benefits that it provides. So I think Cliff shouldn't have to, or the people in the comments shouldn't have to worry about that. It's hard to pull Richard apart because he has such good common sense and he seems to do the right things. Damn. Oh, I give up.
And then
It's
there he goes.
They can switch.
I'm going to carry on the being nice to Richard. Now that's the current thing.
Okay.
I pointed out on Twitter that I have to pat myself on the back a bit here, pat. I was quite ahead of the game in a lot of the stuff that was going on with the US Trump assassination attempt, of putting stuff out there and dissecting it about what was going on with the drone and what had gone on with the counter UAS. So I did take the time of tweeting directly. The current Secret Services Director had suggested he got some Altitude Angel arrow towers. So there you go. So if you get any business, 3%.
You're cheap.
I'm more worried about the attention you've now drawn on us.
Well,
Anybody
all
else
right.
intelligent outfit is looking at it. That's not ideal, is it?
Yeah.
just
Have
something
Karen-
that Bruce said there a second. I want to ask: Is there a UTM service out there somewhere in the world where the hobbyists are paying for it, or is there an application that has been used where the hobbyists are paying to fly? Is there?
Well, I would, again, I think it's where you cut the line on what's the UTM. So without being too wishy-washy on that, there are loads of companies that make apps that support drone pilots, right? I put them in that bucket. So there's weather apps you can get specifically for drones.
But pay to fly. So, but I've not come across, and I've flown pretty much everywhere except the US. But is there an app? Do you have to pay to fly somewhere in the world? Does anyone know?
I haven't heard of any, but it's lost leader time.
AirMap wanted to go down that route, but thankfully they didn't last long enough.
Yeah, well, that was there.
Well, I think Richard actually as more of a service actually predated AirMap, and AirMap was another one of the ones that morphed themselves around. Izzy Wizzy, let's get busy. Now we're a UTM, and they brought it into it. AirMap started wanting, why am I even talking about them? But I wanted to say, and I don't know if Richard, I haven't asked him. I'm going to say now, but I know when operator IDs and a paying for that was proposed in the UK, you very much thought it might be something that you would pay for UK modelers. Maybe you've forgotten you ever said that to me on the private, but that's a few years ago. But the whole thing has changed, as you said earlier. The whole world's jumping on this bandwagon, and that's not the best result. And we do need, it's got to remember, we do need a digital sky. We want to be operating in a digital sky, not the analog sky of, as Bruce is alluding to with the radios and all that thing of granddad's years. And that's what's not moving fast enough. And we are native digital creatures in the drone world, and we can do it in whatever way you want, but let's just do it. Don't care really what it looks like. Let's just get on with it.
Gary, I think that's a beautiful summation, but this community needs to be aware of the other community that exists in aviation today, right? And that other community is the big defense suppliers, the big primes, as they're called, I guess you could say the Thaleses, the Frequentises, etc. of the world, who make their money not being innovative and putting in place technologies which they know will effectively not serve their customers' requirements, but they'll get a big, juicy 5-10-year contract out of and just sew them up in change requests. And the only people who suffer in that, ironically, is the customer paying for it. Often the air navigation service provider, the NATs of the world, etc. And you and I. If we want that digital sky, if we want that access to information, if we want those services at internet scale, you aren't going to get them from the big incumbents. But watch this space. There are RFPs and RFIs active right here in the UK right now, where I have good reason to believe that the direction this country will go in won't be good initially, at least for all of us that expect that digitized, cheap, easy to access service. There are lots of voices out there that have billions and billions invested to lose if us pesky new companies start to eat their dinner. So if you do care about the hobby, whether you fly for fun or you fly for money, pay attention to what's going on in those big, in those big forums, and look at those big RFPs and make your demands known. If you want that standards-based interface, if you want app-based usage, go talk about it.
Less moaning and more understanding. I think, Richard, is what you're saying is stop complaining and start understanding what's actually happening, because I I see a lot of complaining, but I don't see much sense coming out, because a lot of people don't understand. They don't see what is going on with the other companies. They don't see that, and yeah, I agree with you on that. So.
I'm going to say
definitely red card.
You've answered in the comment side to Sparky's question, but it's a case of if the customer charges zero, you don't charge them anything because they're not asking a fee. But presumably, if they put a fee on it, there'll be a percentage to yourself. Is that correct? Yeah, that's right.
Because again, it costs us money to validate credit cards, to process transactions, to deal with the admin and pay them their share, if you like. So again, we are a business, but we're not trying to push that business model on people who don't want to use it, right? So yeah, we don't shy away from that. And as I say, the rate card for every single one of those facilities, landowner or airspace, is available online. It's not hidden. It's on the homepage, on the advert for every site.
I think I need to say at this point, if any other UTM would like to come on and take a complete beating from us, then please do. And no one else has ever emailed me. And not that Richard has. I emailed Richard, but nobody's ever agreed to come on. And oh God, who was that counter UAS company?
We've had a couple of UTM-esque on.
Deadroid.
Yeah, it was one of them, wasn't it? They
asked
them lots of time, lots of time.
Yeah, it's a counter drone that you probably don't go on. We've been having some counter drone on. That'd be fun.
Counter drone. That's something that drives me insane as well.
Your product can be used usefully for that though as well. At the same time,
actually, I would say it's the other way around. We make really good use on the Skyway and the Arrow system of lots of counter drone systems, but rather we use the detection component. The bits that we don't generally care about are the identification piece. Trying to work out what model of drone is irrelevant if your job is to just not hit the drone with another drone. But there's so much, what's the phrase, snake oil in that world. There's a lot that's bad in that domain. There's a lot of promises that are made that don't come true, and in some instances there are bad security responses as a result of it. But we use the counter drone on the Skyway systems just so that we can build up that picture of airspace. And here's the rub: we do that so that we can avoid the kid who's put up a Mavic and is just having a bit of fun in what would otherwise be 10 kilometers wide, the airspace that we're, currently targeting for Skyway. Can you imagine if we had to make that a flight restriction because they had no other way? So again, we go to that length by deploying those sensors to make sure that if little Timmy does want to play around, then he can. We'll just bend the Skyway around little Timmy while he's flying. I don't know anyone else that's got that kind of proposition at the moment. If there are companies out there, we'd love to meet them, because I think teaming with them would be a good thing.
There doesn't seem to be that, and there seems to be, they're all of the same thinking, and it's about drones being conspicuous and RID and all this malarkey, especially when you see in the US, because that's partly why when it comes to these US conversations, we'll say, well, have a look what Altitude Angel's doing, because it's turned it around on its head, the thought process, and I just think it's a shame there aren't more in the YouTube space thinking about that, because that's how you get you deal with a lot of the pushback that would be by taking that approach. So that's why you get your balls far less busted than you otherwise would do.
Speaking of RID,
this is less. Okay, right.
Speaking of RID, did you watch the FPV Freedom Coalition live stream this week?
No.
Apparently,
what were they talking
manufacturers aren't putting standard RID in their drones. Who knew?
And the compliance is
compliance is near zero.
But for the actual devices, when the devices are properly tested, the actual broadcast modules, the compliance is awful.
People listen to me when I said don't do it.
Hang on a minute. Let me build an FCC.
I'll be arrested and extradited for sedition or something.
Let's do it live. Let's build an FCC RID device. We'll use one of these, because all we've got to do is put some components together and put it on a website and say it's FCC compliant, and there we are. It's job done. No test.
Doesn't
nothing.
FCC compliance mean that your device has to accept any interference, including interference that causes undesirable operation? Is that basically? Because every device I've ever made,
that's
will accept undesirable operation.
So spoofing is allowed.
It's on the ISM bands. Can do whatever you like.
But I mean, people aren't. All these drone manufacturers, they're providing bind and fly drones, which are basically not home built. None of them are putting remote ID in there, and the problem they're finding is even with bespoke drones, there aren't systems you can buy off the shelf that will give you standard remote ID, because transmitters don't have the built-in GPS and stuff that they need to broadcast that signal. And it's just no one's complying. It's a joke. No one has been pinged for it, as far as I know at this stage, and it's just a massive exercise in inflicting a cost on people without any sensible benefit, because virtually all the people that are getting caught flying drones flying DJI anyway, and they're using Aeroscope to catch them.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's redundant.
The interesting thing is, I think you hit the nail on the head. How do you enforce that rule? Because if your detection mechanism is to listen for the broadcast that isn't there in the first place, how do you know? And again, I think, a lot of these discussions we have with regulators, I think they have this push, they have this view that, 99% of people are law abiding, so they'll just do the right thing. That's good. And it sort of takes this big sky theory down to sort of something that they think they can quantify. But what they're forgetting there is that that's not really how safety works. That gives you a comfort blanket. But you go try and speak to the other part of the regulator that's concerned with you smashing into something that's in a transponder mandatory zone that isn't carrying a transponder, or you just didn't pick it up, or someone spoofed it. Insert list of problems. So again, we've always said RID, I don't know what problem it solves. I'm sure it's solving something for someone, but it isn't a UTM requested or required technology. I don't think it should be.
Well, it's not conspicuity, is it, in that traditional sense?
No. Well,
so
we've always been against them. It's just well, what we need to do is prove just how bad they are, really, in a whole big context. Just how many ways can they fail that we haven't already identified years ago. But I think pay to play when we get network. Oh, God, we're going to go to 2 hours. I'm going to stop this. The dear viewer, they've been hanging on. They've been hanging on, and we've been ranting on. Richard, thank you very much. You've been a good sport as ever, even though Sparky doesn't agree. You've been a good sport, and we'll see everyone again at 2100 Gin and Tonic next week when it's not the 10th of September. No, so I can't talk about that yet. There is a very interesting guest coming out, but that's a teaser. See you all again next week, 2100 Gin and Tonic. Cheers all. Look after yourselves. Take care. Bye-bye for now.